A more precise title for this video would be necromancy, but the most common thing that people call the character in this story is a witch. Thanks to fantasy literature, Dungeons and Dragons, and video games, which I have nothing against, necromancy is often thought to mean the raising of and control over reanimated corpses and using them as minions. In the strict sense, however, necromancy is simply the practice of communicating with the dead, especially in order to gain knowledge of the future. We find a very famous and somewhat entertaining story of necromancy in the Bible. This was always one of my favorite stories in the Bible, despite having such a dark tone and resulting in multiple disturbing events. And, of course, it employs magic in a way which, although clearly insinuating the evil of its use, by virtue of King Saul turning into an antagonist in the book of Samuel, this also demonstrates that necromancy is perfectly feasible as true magic. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 3 through 20. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him, and they had buried him in Ramah his own city. And Saul had expelled the necromancers and the soothsayers from the land. Then the Philistines assembled, and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul assembled all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And Saul inquired of Yahweh, but Yahweh did not answer him, not by dreams, or by the Urim, or by the prophets. So Saul said to his servants, "Search for me a woman who is a necromancer, so that I may go to her and inquire of her." His servants said to him, "Look, there is a woman who is a necromancer in Endor." So Saul disguised himself, and put on other clothes. And he went with 2 of his men, and they came to the woman by night, and he said, "Please, consult a spirit for me through the ritual pit, and bring up for me the one whom I tell you." But the woman said to him, "Look, you know what Saul did, how he exterminated the necromancers and the soothsayers from the land. Why are you setting a trap for my life to kill me?" Then Saul swore to her by Yahweh, "As Yahweh lives, you will not be punished for this thing." So the woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" He said, "Bring up Samuel for me." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, "Why did you deceive me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I see a divine being coming up from the ground." Then he said to her, "What is his appearance?" She said, "An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe." Then Saul realized that it was Samuel, and he knelt with his face to the ground and bowed down. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul said, "I am in distress, for the Philistines are about to make war against me, but God has turned away from me, and he does not answer me any more, not by the prophets or by the dreams. So I called to you to let me know what I should do." Then Samuel said, "Why do you ask me, since Yahweh has turned away from you and has become your enemy? Yahweh has done to you just as he spoke by my hand. Yahweh has torn the kingdom from your hand and has given it to your neighbor, to David. Because you did not obey Yahweh and did not carry out the fierce anger of his wrath against Amalek, therefore Yahweh has done this thing to you today. And Yahweh will also give Israel with you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. And Yahweh will also give the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." Then Saul immediately fell prostrate to the ground, and he was very afraid because of the words of Samuel. There was no more strength in him, for he had not eaten food all day and all night. So necromancy is not some kind of superstition or fakery. The necromancy ritual worked. This is not subject to debate or interpretation. Something that is important to note is that the witch seems surprised at some point in the story. When the woman saw Samuel, it says she cried out with a loud voice. Now, there are a few ways to interpret this. It can either be from the text trying to simply disparage magic by implying that she didn't think it would work, that she, being a charlatan, was surprised when it actually did work. But an equally valid interpretation, and one that fits better with the text on its own, would be that, since Saul was disguised, the appearance of the prophet Samuel and the manner of his visit alerted her to the identity of the king. The witch says, "Why did you deceive me? You are Saul." It could also be that her powers of interpretation in divination led her to see Saul's identity, her surprise being from the fact that the king had devoted himself previously to the extermination of magicians and soothsayers such as herself. Either way, not only is the witch and Saul able to call forth Samuel, who had been deceased, but Samuel effectively communicates with them. Not only that, but necromancy divination allows Saul to effectively know what is to come, and Samuel conveys new information through the necromancy ritual, saying, "And Yahweh will also give Israel with you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me, and Yahweh will also give the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines."